Despite being a non-limited 1.0 agent in ZenlessZoneZero, Lycaon is still a powerful force and incredibly strong if used correctly. And now, although there are those who dislike using him because of his playstyle or design, he's only gotten stronger with time. As new agents are added to the game, Lycaon has continued to show strong performances and also fits into an increasing number of teams, especially with those built around ice DPS. With that, today we'll go over everything you need to know about Lycaon so that you can play, build, and use him effectively. And if you're someone who doesn't like Lycaon currently, hopefully by the end of today's video, I'll change your mind. If this helps though, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it. Lycaon's playstyle focuses primarily on building days on enemies, gaining energy, then buffing his team's damage with Ice Shred from his core passive and increased stun damage from his additional ability. Just these buffs and debuffs alone do make him valuable to any ice team, but keep in mind that the ability to also contribute towards freezing enemies as well will add great value when fighting bosses that move around too much. With this, Lycaon is a dependable and pretty easy to play stunner who supports ice agents amazingly in dealing more damage. If you're anything like me, learning can sometimes be a real struggle. Luckily, today's sponsor Bootdev is here to change that. Bootdev is a great platform that helps you build consistent learning habits and get into programming, especially if you've ever felt bored or overwhelmed by traditional methods. What makes Bootdev different is how it blends modern game design with actual lessons, keeping you engaged while working towards your goals, whether that's landing a backend developer job or just expanding your programming knowledge. Their hands-on approach combines practical coding lessons with key concepts, giving you real-world prep for interviews and career challenges. Speaking from experience, I personally hit a wall with coding in college, and it was hard to stay focused and easy to burn out. Honestly, games and procrastination were some of the biggest distractions, so Bootdev's method, which feels more like playing a game than taking a class, really helped me out. To give a specific example, learning how to increase the attack of my character did feel much more engaging than just learning about integers and values as a whole. With this, you'll go from beginner to backend ready with languages like JavaScript, Python, and C, and the best part is that you're not just passively learning, you're coding like you would on the job, building actual projects that'll help you along the way. If you're looking for a smarter, more engaging way to learn programming, you should definitely check out Bootdev, and of course you can try the courses for free, and so use my code KANA for 25% off your first year on the annual plan. And once again, thanks to Bootdev for sponsoring this video. Let's now break down Lycaon's kit though by going over his core passive and additional ability. Lycaon's core passive is pretty simple but very valuable. When using his basic attack, you can hold and perform a charged version to deal a slower attack that dishes out 80% more days, but on top of this, his EX special and assist follow-up also lower the enemy's ice resistance by 25%, making any ice DPS deal even more damage. As for his additional ability, this activates when Lycaon is paired with any other ice agent or members of Victoria Housekeeping, but once available, he will increase the target's stun damage multiplier by 35%, assuming he hits a stun target. To be clear though, this means that Lycaon will need to be the one starting the chain attack sequence for his team, or he would otherwise need to be swapped onto field during a stun window and hit said target in order to guarantee this 35% damage increase. In short, Lycaon can deal good amounts of days by holding his basic, reduce the enemy's ice resistance, while also buffing the team's overall damage by properly using his EX special, assist follow-up, and hitting enemies while they're stunned. Lycaon's basic attack though has two forms. Pressing the basic attack input continuously will simply cause Lycaon to attack 5 times in a row, and this deals a minor amount of days and some physical damage. However, you can also hold this button to hold his basic, which then increases the damage of the attack, converts its damage to ice, and also increases the days it deals. To be clear though, despite the main value and goal from performing this charged attack being to gain more days, the added ice buildup from the skill does also start to make a difference when you account for freezing enemies. For his EX special, Lycaon strikes in front of him several times, dealing ice damage and a decent amount of days, but notably you can also hold his EX to charge it. This is at the cost of more energy, but the exchange here is that it significantly strengthens how much days it applies to. Additionally, if you recall, Lycaon's core passive using his EX special will reduce the ice damage resistance of enemies by 25% for 30 seconds, and additionally this long duration means that you don't necessarily have to keep track of how long until it wears off. Now let's talk about Lycaon's assist. These skills perform similarly to other stun agents like Lycaon, but it is worth mentioning that the days it applies is pretty high all things considered. Additionally, as with his EX special, Lycaon does also gain the ability to reduce the enemy's ice resistance when using his assist follow-up attack, so this is a valuable skill to perform if Lycaon is attempting to reapply the ice shred from his core passive. Lycaon's dodge is pretty standard, but because of his role as a stun agent, it is worth performing his dodge counter when possible, given its stun application and its synergy with Shockstar Disco. Just like with his dodge, Lycaon's chain attack is pretty similar to others since stun agents don't typically gain value from attacking enemies that are already stunned, but as we'll see in the combo section, Giving up Lycaon's chain attack so that another agent can use it will be helpful in certain situations. That said, we'll break that down further once we get there. Regarding his ultimate, Lycaon hits enemies in a wide area with multiple strong strikes, dealing ice damage, but in truth, this is just yet another ability to generate daze against an enemy. Now, despite me saying that, the amount of daze that this deals is pretty significant, as the 1846% multiplier does account for anywhere between 30 to 50% of an enemy's total stun meter being filled when you use it. When it comes to Lycaon's skills, his basic and EX special are his top priority since he uses them the most for dazing, but after this, upgrading his ultimate can be helpful for adding more daze when using it. Following this, his dodge and assist skills are lower priority, but it is still worth noting that they do contribute to his overall daze and damage. As for his combos, Lycaon is pretty simple. First, his main combo starts with the following: perform 2 charged basic attacks, and on the third, perform an even longer held charge attack. Afterward, follow this with his EX special and repeat the cycle until the enemy is dazed or until it's necessary to swap to another agent. This makes full use of Lycaon's core passive, applying more daze compared to just using basic attacks alone, and to add to this, it also reduces the enemy's ice resistance, making it even more effective. Before we move on, however, keep in mind that this combo does keep Lycaon on field longer in some cases, but this trade-off is often worth it, especially thanks to these charge attacks having an 80% increase in daze. Additionally, if you wanted to add a defensive assist before swapping onto field with Lycaon, this will also allow the ice shred to apply to the rest of Lycaon's abilities before they are used. That said, this is pretty optional, as Lycaon's damage is not always super impactful for clearing a fight, but of course this depends on how close things are and the state of your account. On the topic of dazing and stunning, let's now talk about chain attacks and chain attack canceling specifically. In short, Lycaon's team can make use of the technique known as chain attack canceling, and as always, if you've played ZenlessZoneZero for a while now, this is probably something you've heard of once or twice. But for those unfamiliar, a chain attack cancel is a way to allow a single agent to use 2 chain attacks instead of 1, but this is at the cost of another agent's potential chain attack. In this case, that means Lycaon or a fellow support/stun agent will lose the ability to use a chain attack, but in return, the team's main DPS will be able to perform another chain, dealing decent damage depending on the agent. On a related note, it's important to mention that chain attack cancels used to give a character a second back-to-back chain attack can only be done against boss enemies, so keep this in mind before you try and use this technique. Chain attack canceling is a well-known and commonly used strategy though, and it's certainly worth doing whenever possible. This technique allows your team to deal more damage compared to a standard chain attack sequence involving the rest of your team, and Lycaon is especially good for chain attack canceling because he can trigger chain attacks very easily/quickly with his charged basic. With other agents, you may need to spend energy or take a longer period of time to do this, but Lycaon on the other hand has a quick and easy way of triggering chains that can help you go through your rotations quicker. Now let's move on to W engines. Lycaon's signature W engine, the Restrained, and Lighter's signature Blazing Laurel are easily his 2 best general options, and this is because of the value they add to Lycaon and his team. The added crit damage value from Blazing Laurel and the daze from Restrained pair perfectly with his ideal teams and playstyle, but that said, one of these options is a limited S rank engine and the other is a standard banner S rank, so let's move now to A ranks. Enter Precious Fossilized Core, which is definitely a top tier W engine, especially for daze, thanks to its powerful passive that excels when enemies are above 75% health. That said, its performance does suffer when below that threshold, making it best suited for fights where fewer stuns are more than enough to finish the enemy. With this, Precious Fossilized Core is powerful if you're using it in content where your goal is reaching something like 3 stars on Deadly Assault, or for when you take it into fights where you can eliminate a boss within the first stun window in content like Shiryu Defense. Now, despite all this, it is important to note that the popular Miyabi, Lycaon, Sokaku team that's been floating around does actually prefer energy regen based W engines, and this is because of how frequently Lycaon needs to use his EX special to stun, freeze, and control enemies in said mono ice team. As a result though, Steam Oven and Hellfire Gears are 2 exceptional choices when pairing Lycaon with Miyabi and Sokaku, but otherwise they're just solid options for general use when pairing him as a stunner. When it comes to Lycaon's disk drives, there are a few solid ways to build him though. His best all-around 4-piece sets include Shockstar Disco, Astro Voice, Freedom Blues, and Protopunk, and if you're planning on using him in the Miyabi, Lycaon, Sokaku team mentioned earlier, Astro Voice is another great option, making use of its passive to buff the team. That said, Shockstar Disco is generally the most versatile set thanks to its huge boost in daze and impact, making it perfect for maximizing Lycaon's stunner roll, regardless if you are a new or old player. For 2-piece sets, the best options to pair with Lycaon are Shockstar Disco, Woodpecker Electro, Swing Jazz, and Freedom Blues, and the reason for this is simple. Woodpecker helps with Lycaon's minimal but still noticeable damage, Swing Jazz will give you additional energy regen, and Freedom Blues increases its anomaly proficiency. However, if you aren't using Shockstar as your 4-piece effect, I would still encourage you to use it in some way, as this 2-piece effect with the added impact is always helpful. That said though, you should be using whichever has the best rolls for you. Main stat wise, Lycaon gains the most value from a 4th slot crit rate or crit damage disc, and in his 5th slot an ice damage pen ratio or attack percent main instead. For a 6th slot, impact is always best, but substat wise, attack percent, crit rate, and crit damage are the most important for Lycaon's build. Before we go any further, it is worth noting that Lycaon used with anomaly agents would change his priority on 4th slot to anomaly proficiency, and the rest of his build would then also prioritize anomaly as a substat and attack percent as his next best stat afterward. With this, a sample stat line for Lycaon would look like the following: at least 50 crit rate, 100 crit damage, 2000 attack, and a varying amount of impact depending on your 2-piece set and W engine choice. But as a general recommendation, I would use 4-piece Shockstar Disco, 2-piece Swing Jazz, 4th slot crit rate, 5th slot ice damage, and 6th slot impact. Moving to Mindscapes, Lycaon's first Mindscape increases the days dealt by his EX special by 12%, and if the EX special is charged, this buff is boosted by an additional 10%. This is honestly a decent increase to his overall days, but given the 8-second trigger condition, it's a good but not insane Mindscape overall. Lycaon's second Mindscape does give him 5 energy whenever he stuns or activates a chain attack, and this is more of a quality of life upgrade to help with his energy generation rather than something that really boosts his damage directly. That said, while this is an improvement to his resource management, this also helps immensely if you're using Lycaon in the Miyabi Lycaon Sokaku team, but we'll break that down later. For his 4th Mindscape, if Lycaon gets hit while performing a basic attack or special attack, he instantly gains a shield equal to 7.5% of his max HP that lasts for 15 seconds. While the shield is active, his anti-interrupt level is increased, making it harder for enemies to interrupt his actions. This effect can only be triggered every 15 seconds, and truthfully, I was thinking of different ways that the shield could help players in a more offensive way, but admittedly, this was only really helpful in some cases where Lycaon would otherwise be knocked over. For his 6th Mindscape, when Lycaon lands a charge attack against an enemy, they now take 10% increased damage for him, stacking up to 5 seconds, lasting 12 seconds. In general, as you might have seen from my other guides, the 6th Mindscape for most agents will improve their personal DPS or contributions, and Lycaon is simply no different. That said, the increased damage is a noticeable but not as impactful change as you think it is. Back in version 1.0, Lycaon's team options were pretty limited, as he was mainly paired with Elle and Joe, the only ice DPS available at the time. Now, while he was the best stunner for her, this also meant that he was primarily used just for that one team specifically. As a result, if you didn't have Ellen, there wasn't really much reason to invest in Lycaon. However, things have changed with new ice DPS like Miyabi and especially Hugo joining the roster. Lycaon has since then now become a much more versatile and valuable agent, and he now fits into a wider range of teams and is capable of clearing all sorts of content. With that, here are some of the best team compositions I've tested with him. The first I want to talk about involves Hugo as the focus point, but as you can see, this team offers a lot of flexibility. Hugo is the centerpiece here, and he's an ice DPS who pairs especially well with stun-based agents, making Lycaon a perfect match thanks to how powerful he is when dazing. The 3rd slot is quite flexible and can be swapped out depending on the content you're tackling, but it's also a slot that can be affected by who you have actually available. Overall though, while it's ideal to run a 2nd stunner alongside Lycaon to get the most out of Hugo, any of the listed supports will still perform decently depending on the situation. The next team I want to briefly mention involves Miyabi as the main DPS. With her, Astra Yao and Caesar are both strong picks, and this is because both offer powerful skills that pair well with Miyabi's kit. Lycaon as the stunner role fits perfectly and also brings a lot of stun and damage bonus value to the team, but beyond just Astra and Caesar, Lighter is another solid choice too, thanks to his strong ice damage buffs and ice res shred. That said, running 2 stunners isn't exactly what Miyabi needs most, since she can otherwise just work off of disorders or with a mono ice based team. That said, this isn't to discredit how powerful Lighter's buffs are, and as a final mention, Sokaku does also bring some decent buffs and makes for a good 3rd option, especially if you don't have a final limited character to fill this slot. The final team I tested extensively was Ellen based, and was also something I wanted to experiment with since version 1.0 so long ago. Now this team is pretty similar to the Miyabi lineup with 2 key differences. First, Miyabi starts to lose damage when others are on field for too long, and second, Ellen just doesn't deal nearly as much damage as Miyabi. Now power creep and jokes aside, these 2 teams can play pretty similarly given their inclusion of stunners as potential partners, but overall it's clear that Ellen is much more reliant on the buffs she can get, the debuffs that are applicable by her support, and the actual partner that she's paired with. By comparison, Miyabi can sometimes clear content regardless of her team, but that's really more of a testament to just how good Miyabi is. Despite this, an Ellen Lycaon flexible 3rd team is a very comfortable lineup, and it's true, this team can still clear in version 1.7. The buffs, the attack agent oriented fight that enhances your characters when performing defensive assists, and even the specific EX special buffs for content like shield defense can definitely help Ellen, but as we've seen through the increase of HP over time, it does take a lot more help for external factors for Ellen to actually be successful. Now let's answer one of the most important questions about Lycaon. Is he worth building and using? The short answer is yes, since he's definitely one of the better standard agents available in ZenlessZoneZero, but the long answer needs some more context. Lycaon is by no means the best stunner in ZenlessZoneZero, especially when you consider the fact that some characters appreciate the new mechanics of limited agents like Lighter and his stun duration increase. That said, it would be dishonest to understate how powerful Lycaon is for all teams, new or old. With countless videos of teams like the Mono Ice Miyabi lineup clearing almost every single deadly assault boss week after week, it's clear that Lycaon still has an impact on the game. Additionally, even through personal experiences from myself, from my community, and data collecting sites like Pridewin, Lycaon has proven himself to be a valuable asset on any account, especially if you're looking to buff ice-based DPS. He has a very consistent clear time, a high peak, and impressive boss kills, especially with Miyabi, a straightforward and specific use case that he's very good in, and ultimately, he just wants to synergize with most limited ice agents in the game. Beyond this, the flexibility he now has because of how long his debuffs last, and his potential to buff even the strongest of ice teams, currently makes him very worthwhile to invest in, especially if you're someone who's taken Miyabi or Hugo and need an answer to bosses like Butcher or Bringer. That said, even though his synergy is limited to a few characters, he fills his role extremely well and remains one of the best support agents in the game. With that, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you learned something, and as always, guys, you can check me out at the rest of my socials. Thank you again for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy,